Submission validation, a discussion of the sync, SIRS, and soft validation errors. So we are on the view submission screen, and if you're unfamiliar with the view submission screen or how to get there, you would use the left navigation, upload view submission, and select view submission. From the view submission screen, you can see all the recent submissions from your LEA. If we take a step back and go to File Upload, this is where you would submit your files. Now, we have a training for batch file uploads that explains this process in detail, so I'm not going to. However, when you're submitting your student incidents, you would begin with the sync file. This file would be uploaded. You would select the file from your desktop, then you would upload it, then you would submit a second file. That may be the SIRS here, or even the SOF. Now what I wanted to do is show you all three files required to complete student incidents. Remember, the sync must be submitted and posted prior to the SIRS and SOF. The SIRS and SOF have no relationship to each other and can be submitted in any order so long as you have a sync posted. Now let's go back to view submissions. And so we're using a fictitious LEA CSIS training Berkeley right now. And as you can see, we have a sync file submitted. The revision complete, and then we can see that there's a student offense. It was an upload failed. Then you see that there's a result file. It failed out, but then we have a revision complete SIRS file. So at this point, we have student incident records and student result records. Then we begin the soft submission. Again, upload failed. We resolved the issue, and then we submitted a file with errors. Now we've posted this file so that we can look at some of these errors. However, you can see it says revision complete. So at this point, we may have completed the submission. We have submitted all three files related to the incident, and they're all in revision complete. Revision complete is an indication that I can expect the uploaded records to be relevant on my snapshot reports, and if there's any discrepancy in ODS data, these records will also trigger CVR errors. So I have bookmarked a couple pages so that we can look at errors and examine them together. So let's see what we have here. So here we have a sync file with IVR errors, and it was submitted by one of our testers deliberately to trigger errors, but it was good to practice on and resolve some of these errors. So we have several errors related to the sync file. But here's one that is always troubling, and that's the GER 0005. LEA does not have ownership of student enrollment to make the update. So I have this student, and it says GER 005. So I open the record, and I can see the record in detail, and I can see every field associated with the sync record. Now, if I'm unfamiliar with the GER 005, I can go to the CalPADS error list. It's on the system documents page. It's also accessible through CalPADS through a footer link and in the help menu. There's a lot of places we can go to find the CalPADS error list. It's an Excel document. We just try to give you multiple places to find it. So here's the CalPAD system documentation page, and here's the error list. You'd click the link, it would download, and voila, the CalPAD's error list. So as you can see, there's a tab at the bottom that says Student Incident, and then you can filter for your errors. And we just want the GER5 for now. The LEA does not have ownership of student enrollment to make the update, so we confirm this is the error that we have. It says look at the enrollment start date, look at the enrollment exit date, and the academic year ID. So let's begin there when we troubleshoot our error. So let me drag this out of the view. Let's go back to our student incident and copy the SSID. We're going to look at the student's enrollment record. Okay. So I'm going to paste the SSID in. It's a quick search. Hopefully it's faster, and it was. And so we're on the student detail screen for the student, and we look at the enrollment record, 9/1/2019, no exit date. So why don't we have ownership, right? So we look at the reporting LEA and the school of attendance. We come here, reporting LEA, school of attendance is the same, Butte Valley High. I go back and I look, Butte Valley High. Now, if you have multiple monitors, you can look at the records side by side. That's a little bit easier, but we're tabbing. And so then I go down and said academic year ID, academic year ID. Well, 2022-23. So I can see that that's a problem. And so this would probably trigger multiple errors, but one of which is ownership. We do not own the student for this academic year, right? That's well in advance. So that's most likely what's triggering the GER5. And so in the student information system, I'd find out where the academic year is and correct that. And so just so you can see what I was referring to, you look at fields of validation, where your discrepancy between your rejected record and the CalPADS ODS lies. You have enrollment start date, enrollment exit date. That's your period of enrollment. So that's your ownership period. And then you have academic year ID. And I can see that this academic year does not correspond with the academic year in the enrollment record. Okay, so let's see if there's another one to demonstrate. Okay, so let's look for another error. And as you can see here, sync 0499, removal to interim alternative setting populated for a non-special education student. So we have it queued up for you, sync 0499F. Let's open the record and look at it in details. Removal to interim alternative setting reason code 1. Removal to interim alternative setting populated for non-special ed student. That's the description. So if I'm confused, I drag in my error list again and I filter for sync 0499. And I don't see it, so we'll scroll through here. And it's at the bottom. I don't know, it wasn't a 0, it was just a 499. So there's a lesson for you there. If you can't search for it in the error list, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. It's just not listed as you would expect. So let's look at the error description for the sync 0499 or the sync 499. Removal to interim alternative setting reason code must only be populated for students with disabilities. So the fields of validation will indicate where the discrepancy is, And the removal to interim alternative setting reason code is one of the fields of validation. The reporting LEA is another field of validation, and the incident occurrence date. And so I guess this particular error presents some critical thinking challenges, right? Because I'm looking at these errors and they're all in the sync file, and I know that because it says 18.14, 1804, 1817. The sync file is the 18th file type of CalPads. And so I don't think the error is going to be in the sync file. All we did was submit a record. I think we have to look somewhere else. So let's see what the suggested resolutions say. The removal to interim alternative setting was populated for a student that does not have an active SPED record. So it's not indicating to us that we should look at a SPED record here for validation, but we can tell that it's suggesting that the student doesn't have an active SPED record. So what we can do is verify whether or not the student is a student with disabilities. And so we don't need to copy the SSID because I believe this is the same student we demonstrated earlier. And what we want to see is if the student is a student with disability and has an active SPED program record. So we go to special education. And again, we don't see an active SPED record. And so if this was a student with disability, we need to populate that active SPED record. If it's not, what we should do is go in our student information system and remove the interim alternative setting reason code because it's only for students who are receiving special education services, those students with disabilities. So those are two errors from the sync that you might come across. Let's see if we can find a different example. So we're looking at a student incident results file. There's several to choose from. So let's look at a new error. This is one that I'm pretty unfamiliar with. A CSIS 0506 invalid law enforcement referral. That's CSIS code 700 or result code 700, or it tells you incident result code, right? So down here, here's the record and the error. And I'm going to open it. So it's telling me that this 700 is invalid. And typical with invalid warnings, it's a comparison to a different field. This error is invalid based on other information. And so I'm going to pull the error list back in front of you again, and I've already filtered for the description because if it didn't work out, I wasn't going to present it. That's what I was going to do. So if you look at the error description, we can see that it says a student must not have an incident result code 700 law enforcement referral and an incident result code 800 school-related arrest for the same incident. So the key here is the same incident. This is telling me the student has two records if this error triggered, right? And then again, understanding the error, the student cannot have incident result code 700 with an incident result code 800 at the same incident, right? So either the student was referred or was arrested. Can't be both, right? Not for a single incident. And so taking what I learned from the error list, I know that this record triggered because there's another record in conflict, and I need to find that record that has an 800 incident result code. And so it's possible that record also triggered an error, but I just have a hunch. I'm gonna look at the view post records because we're talking about the same incident, so it's probably the same file. And I'm going to look here. And so I have the same student, and I can see that it says 800 law enforcement referral, not including related arrests. And so these two records create a discrepancy between each other, and one of them would need to be removed. Either the student was arrested or the student was referred. While a student may have multiple results, student incident results record for a single incident, this particular combination is invalid. So moving on to the student offense file, let's see if we can find one or two errors to demonstrate. So here's a list of errors. We see the GER5 is here again, but the same thing will apply. You would look at the CalPADS error list under the student offense, see the fields of validation. I'm sure it's going to be a comparison of the student's enrollment record and perhaps the academic year, the incident, the offense. The offense would have the school of attendance, the LEA, and the academic year. So I'm sure those are the fields you'd have to verify. Pretty always, the GER5 is a comparison between your rejected record and the student's enrollment record in the CalPADS ODS. So of these errors, let's look at the SOF 091, invalid student offense code and weapon category combination. So again, when you see invalid, a lot of times that's a comparison. It's not a value not found, it's invalid based on some other information. And this error's name tells us the other information, the weapon category combination. So we'll open a record. So we're going to be comparing the student offense code and the weapon category. It says other weapon, sale of controlled substance, okay? So this is a bit vague. Let's go ahead and drag this over. Again, this is the error list. We've already filtered for SOF 0091. We've read the error name and description a couple times. We see that the fields validated are only those two specific fields, student offense and weapon category codes, right? So let's look at the suggested resolution. If a weapon is reported as being used in an offense, then the student offense code must be one which involves the use of a weapon. The student offense code says sale of a controlled substance. It doesn't say any kind of descriptive of a weapon being involved. So that might be the problem. Let's continue to read. There are only specific combinations of codes that are allowable for these two fields, as documented in the CalPADS valid code combinations document. The weapon category code should be left blank for student discipline records with a student offense code of 1 or 2 possession of imitation firearm. Things to check for in the submission. Review the values populated in the weapon category code and the student offense code and verify the combination is valid using the code combinations document or the valid code combinations document. So that was a mouthful. There's a lot of reading, but we kind of knew where they were going from experience. So I'm going to pull up the valid code combinations document. And I have it ready, just not queued up in the right source. So like the code set, like the error list, it's a tabbed Excel document. And I'm tabbing to offense code weapon category. And so the easiest thing is probably for me to filter for weapon category code. So I look at the error list, and we used 40 other weapon. So we can see that there's only 4 allowable student offense codes that we can use. A 101, which is possession, sale, furnishing a firearm, brandishing a knife, possession of a knife or dangerous object, and possession of an explosive. Jeez Louise, an explosive. School of Hard Knocks for sure. Now, we may accept that this student had a ed code violation, a student offense, sale of a controlled substance. But that's a record in and of itself. What it seems to be is the student committed multiple offenses. So we would need to submit this record with no weapon category. It would be blank. We would submit this record and we would have an offense for sale of controlled substance. We would then, from our student information system, create a second offense tied to this incident for the student, and we'd have the category code 40 other weapon, and let's just say the student used a knife. We would use one of these matching codes, the one that's most appropriate. Did the student brandish the knife? Was the student just in possession of the knife? That's the difference between 103 and 104. Or did the student provide the knife to someone else? 101, right? And so we have a choice here. The one we're excluding 105 because no student had an explosive, right? Just a knife. So we have 101, 103, 102. The key is if a student has a weapon, that in itself is a violation of ed code. That is an offense by itself. If that student, so just possession or ownership using that weapon is an offense. If that offense was committed in the commission of another offense, a sale of a controlled substance, bullying, assault, that bullying would be the second offense submitted as well. So students can have multiple offenses. In particular, if they have a weapon and it's more than it just being found on their person, they're probably going to have multiple offenses. So we see we have another error here. Missing weapon category code, the SOF 0095. And so we have it queued up. In this particular record, we have a student offense code 100, possession, sale, furnishing a firearm. We're specifically saying this student has a firearm. However, we don't have anything in the weapon category code. And so we know that one is required, and so we can see that it's 100. So we would go back to our valid code combination document as we are troubleshooting and trying to correct our error. And let's clear the filters. And I'm going to use the student offense code, filter for just 100. And so here are my available options. 40 that was in the other record wouldn't be valid now. And either we have to describe the type of firearm. So you can see there's handguns, shotguns, and rifle, other firearms, or multiple weapons with the firearm. So these are the weapon category codes 10, 20, 30, 50 that would be valid when we resubmit this record, because it's missing the firearm description, the firearm category, when we say the student had possession, sale, furnishing a firearm. So hopefully we've put you in a better position to troubleshoot some of the errors that you're going to see. Certainly you may have an error that we didn't demonstrate, but the key is understanding the method to it. You want to look at the record in detail. You want to compare using the CalPADS error list, the fields of validation. The suggested resolution in the CalPADS error list for the particular error will give you an indication of where to look. And sometimes you have to do some critical thinking skills. You have to do some analysis, because the error list is a general description. It'll point you in the right direction, but there's more scenarios that may trigger the errors than can be described. And so you just have to use your knowledge of CalPADS and do some deducing sometimes to resolve these errors. A lot of times it's just logic and common sense. Sometimes it is experience. And if you're lacking that experience, anytime you're troubleshooting errors, feel free to submit a ticket to the CalPADS service desk. We would love to help you. And so that concludes our review of the student incident errors. So that concludes our review of the student incident submission errors. Reporting examples. Examples of common incident scenarios. Let's take a few minutes to look at different scenarios and see how various incidents can be reported. So here we have the incident list from CSIS Training Berkeley. And when I click open, I can see the details of each incident. This was demonstrated in data population in a different module. Here I have different incidents tabbed just to expedite the processing of CalPADS. So let's look at our first incident. As always, the incident details are on the top, where we have the incident occurrence date and the incident ID. Individual students are listed below. And this is a very simple incident. We have a single student and a single result. In the incident record, you can see that the student committed a statutory offense. No instructional support was indicated. So this student, assuming that this is a general ed student, and we know that because the removal to interim alternative reason code has not been populated. So this student didn't even have homework assigned during the suspension. We know the student was suspended in school, so that explains why there perhaps was no homework. All right, but it would beg the question why the student wasn't given instructional support if it was an in-school suspension. Typically, the reason why a student is suspended in school would be so they don't miss curriculum, although they are receiving corrective actions, right? So, you know, as an example, this would highlight a discrepancy, but this is probably the kind of analysis that you and your staff would have to do. We can see that the student was suspended either by school or district personnel by the code, and the suspension, the in-school suspension, was a total of 3 days. And because the statutory offense indicator has a Y, we would look down here at the student offenses, and we see a code 502, aided or abetted physical injury. Perhaps it was a fight, we don't know, right? But this is a pretty common scenario. You're going to have students that get into physical altercations from time to time. They may be suspended. That may be one of the type of corrective actions. And then they may be a single student incident. If one student throws a punch and the other guy has better judgment, single student incident. So let's look at another one. Again, I can see that this is a single student incident. The incident ID and the occurrence date are with the incident details. We have a student that did not commit a statutory offense and is not provided instructional support. Again, these are part of the incident record. The student incident results, the SIRS, shows me that the student received other means of correction, and the disciplinary authority or the incident results authority was school or district personnel. And the duration of those other means of correction was not even a day. So I'll leave it to your imagination what may have happened, but we have an incident that did not require a suspension, expulsion, and was not mapped to a statutory offense. So this is a scenario. It begs the question, if we don't see the incident result showing restraints or seclusion, and we don't see the incident indicating a statutory offense, it would seem to me that perhaps this incident didn't necessarily need to be reported. However, you do have the ability to report incidents that are not statutory offenses outlined by Ed Code 48900 and 48915 and are not incidents of restraints or seclusion. So just want to make sure that the data in your SIS is mapped appropriately, because again, when you don't have an incident of restraint or seclusion and there is no statutory offense, one questions if this incident needed to be reported. So here we have an example of another incident. Again, it's a single student incident. The student committed a statutory offense. The student was suspended. However, we don't have an offense record. And so I would anticipate a CVR on the back end catching this. And this tells me this record was submitted via batch file. Online, as was demonstrated in the data population, once you indicate statutory offense, the offense code and the weapon category code fields appear, and they have to be populated, or at least the student offense does. But if you submit the files online, you can submit an incident and a result, and that's why we can see it, because both the incident and the result is here. This is the minimum required. However, that statutory offense indicator is a yes. We would expect to see the student offense file posted. We don't, and perhaps it's a timing issue. Perhaps the file sitting in queue waiting for processing now as I'm reviewing the record. If not, you will see a CVR indicating that you have an incident, a statutory offense saying there's a statutory offense and no offense record. So here we have a single student incident, and we have the student who's committed or who has multiple results, right? Single student, single offense, multiple results. This student was in possession of a firearm, which was a handgun. The student offense indicator 100 says the student possessed or sold a firearm, and then that firearm category is a handgun. The student was suspended and then expelled. A 5-day suspension and then a year-long suspension, expulsion. And then because we have a incident result code of 200 expulsion, that means the incident result modification code for this SIRS record is required. There was no modification. And remember, the guidance is with an expulsion, typically it wouldn't be a whole year, right? Because you're going to report the length of time that student was expelled until they began their new program or their new district enrollment, right? Until they enrolled somewhere else. So from the last day they were in attendance at your school until when they resumed their education at another district, or until the end of school. And so, perhaps student could be suspended on the first day of school in the middle of August and never enroll in a school. So maybe it lasts the whole school year, but that'll probably be closer to 250 calendar days as opposed to 365. So you're not really going to see a 365-day period often. So just refer to the CalPAS data guide when you're looking at rules, the business rules regarding expulsions. And then let's look at another scenario here. Now we can see that we have multiple students involved in this incident, 3 in fact. So this represents 3 sync records here. And online it shows you the individual student information separated from the common incident information. And so we have 2 students that did not commit statutory offenses, 1 that did, right? Then the student incident results. Each student has a corresponding results record, right? 2 students were physically restrained. 1 student has an out-of-school suspension. And that student was suspended for bullying. What we see is an error that wasn't caught is that the incident result duration days is not populated here. When you have a student that's suspended, when you have a student in school suspension, you have a student with expulsion, a duration days is expected and required. Again, we are in the test environment. I'm pointing this out because the test environment does not always it's a test environment. It does not always process the way it's expected. The testers are in control. They set the parameters. They build different scenarios, so on and so forth. And we're just using it as a demo environment so that you can see Waylon Smithers, Captain Marvel, and Marshmallow are not real students. So I apologize, but I just want you to know the expectation for disciplinary or incident result codes 100, 110, and 200 is that there will be days. Okay, and so, that was just a brief demonstration of what incidents look like, different examples. And you got to go into the incident details to see each individual incident. Now, we can quickly go to a student detail screen and look at the student profile. And I just picked Captain Marvel because I think this student had multiple incidents. No, just 1. So this is what it looks like in the student incident record. Let's grab another SSID, maybe Waylon Smithers. And I'm going to paste the SSID in. Hopefully it will process very quickly. I don't care about the enrollment. We want to look at the incident result and the offenses. So here we can see that this student had 2 behavioral incidents, and 1 on 11/9/2019 and 1 on 9/15/2019. And then one of those incidents had a statutory offense. And to identify that, we have 19/011. And so we can see here 19/011, and we can match it up. And a trick, if a student had multiple offenses and multiple incidents and you wanted to match them up, you can copy 1, and then let's try Control F, and you can match them up that way. So if a student had multiple offenses and multiple incidents and you wanted to match up offenses to incidents, you can simply do a find. So this concludes our reporting examples of common incident scenarios. And if there is a specific scenario or something that you would like viewed, we can add to this. Just when you finish this training, please use the survey and indicate what can be added to make this more realistic or more beneficial to our audience. So thank you.